All right, how's it going, guys? Good morning, real closers. Good morning. How's it going, Gustavo?
Hey everybody, going good, going good. Happy Monday.
All right, today's going to be an interesting topic: how to generate a listing, off-market property listing. We've talked a lot about, the market shift. Some markets are still hot. Some markets are still, they're changing slowly. We talked about how to get more listings, and today it's very specific to off-market property. So, Gustavo, why don't you take it away and let us know what we could do right now to get that off-market listing?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. So off-market property list, I think that's a really interesting, tool. It's a tool like anything else, right? The off-market property list can serve a few purposes, right? So the purpose that I find that is the most valuable one for to have an off-market property list. Well, let me start with the definition. What is an off-market property list? It's a list of homes and sellers, right? Sellers and homes that are not on the MLS, but that have an interest to sell under XYZ conditions, right? And I'll go into a few examples of what that means. But that's essentially what an off-market property list should be. And in my very humble opinion, every single real estate agent, right, that's a pro, should always have an off-market property list and keep it up to date every single week. You should have it. And I'll go into a few examples on why it's so valuable. But every single real estate agent that's a pro should have a list of homes and sellers that for whatever reason are not listed on the MLS, but they've told you, hey, I've got intention to sell if XYZ circumstances are met, right? And I do want to say, like, a compliance note, right? Some MLSs are very strict about how to handle these. So number one, be compliant. I don't know all the rules of every MLS out there, but some of them are kind of touchy about these things. So be compliant, do things in the right way. But the sellers have a right. The sellers exist that for whatever reason, they don't want to be on the MLS at the moment, but if they find the right opportunity, they might be willing to sell, right? And I think as the market shifts, that number shifts, the number is going to grow, I think, right? So that's really interesting. Great. So you should have that list because you can use it in many different ways, right? One of the main ways that you can use an off-market property list is for buyers. As the market shifts, buyers are going to be more valuable. Okay. And I know some people have been pulling their hair out especially the last 24 months. It's been tough for buyers out there. You have more buyers than you can handle. You can't get properties for your buyers, etc. Right. So, but as buyers become more valuable, one of the ways to attract buyers, to entice buyers to work with you, to get them at least, Roberto, interested in meeting with you, right, is to have an off-market property list, right? That's like, okay, what you have off, you can actually put that in a Facebook ad. Again, be compliant. You can put, if you can, I'd put it in a Facebook ad and I go, hey, I've got an off-market property list for, let's say, my area, my neck of the woods, the east side of Seattle. East side Seattle off-market property list, who wants it, right? And I'm willing to share it, but you gotta pay the toll, which is I'd love to have your name, email, and phone number. That's it, right? Boom, let's give them access to that. Great. Or if you're already talking to them, right, you can entice them, hey, I can show you my off-market property list, but I only do that for qualified buyers. That's it. That's the only thing I ask. I committed to these owners that I only show this list to people that can actually buy the home. Would you be okay to answer a few quick questions? Great. Let me pass you over to Roberto, my lender. Great. A pre-qual. Let's just call it a pre-qual, not even a pre-qual. Great, you're being pre-qualified. Let's sit down and let me show you these homes, right? There's many ways you can use that with potential buyers. Many ways you can use that, right? Because the most important thing is you want them to be interested and you want to have an excuse to sit down and meet them. Why is it so important to sit down and talk and meet a potential buyer face-to-face? Because 73%, this is numbers from 2021, 73% of people buying and selling a home will work with the first agent they actually sit down with. They will work with the first agent they actually sit down with. That is mind-boggling to me, right? Like, that's a real statistic. And this is across all age groups. It's slightly lower for younger, first-time home buyers, it's like 70. And for older homeowners, boomers, silent generation, 65 and above, it's 90%. They're going to work with the first agent they actually meet with, right? What does that tell me? It tells me that the first agent, the agent that actually gets them to sit down with them is skilled. They've got something to offer. It's not just whoever they randomly sit down with. Don't misunderstand that number, right? My interpretation of that number is the person that is the best at persuading them, enticing them, interesting them to sit down with you, they're going to get the business. That's not, when you look at it that way, that number is not that surprising, right? It's not that surprising. And yes, a lot of these folks are coming from referral and recommendation into the, for sure. But somewhere around half of them, in some markets even more than that, did not know their agent, were not referred to their agent that way, right? A good chunk of those buyers are up for grabs. A good chunk of those sellers are up for grabs. Whoever wins the game of motivating them, enticing them, persuading them to sit down with them has 2/3 of the problem, or almost 3/4 of the problem already solved. It's basically 3/4, right? That you basically just got to sit down and figure out what you can do for them. Really, really important to understand that. Off-market property list is a great way to help them out. Another thing where you can use an off-market property, that's one. I think the most important one is it is a buyer magnet. It's called a lead magnet. And it is a great motivator to get people interested in working with you and knowing you and talking to you. Great, amazing. Another way that it can be used is that if you're an agent, if you're an investor-friendly agent, right? An agent that works with investors, with flippers, with wholesalers, that is something you can give to them as well. You can offer that to them, right? Why does an agent want to know, buyers, flippers, investors, and wholesalers? Because they need agents too. They need agents sometimes to acquire properties. Sometimes they find them on their own. Sometimes they need agents to sell properties, okay? That's why I loved working with investors when I was a retail real estate agent, because of the recurring business aspect of that relationship, either on the purchase side or on the sell side, whatever it was. So those are just two reasons why an off-market property list can be valuable. Okay, great. Let's assume I've convinced you. Gus, I get it. I love it. I understand it. Great. I think that can be useful for me for whatever reason. I think that'd be useful for me. Well, how do you make one, right? There's no inventory, Gus. I know the market is shifting and we're seeing that shift occur slowly, but it's a very uneven shift, right? You've got markets like Florida, especially South Florida, that are white hot even right now, right? There's no inventory there. You might have other markets. I was looking at this data recently in Idaho, Boise, Idaho, Utah, parts of Arizona. It's becoming a little bit more balanced, right? You're not seeing it be white hot like it's been the last 24 months. It's very uneven across the country, folks. You might be in an area that's seeing a slight shift. You might be in an area where it's business as usual. It's still really hard to get a home. What do we do there? Right? Well, I've got three ways I've got three tactics that can help you generate potential sellers to put in your off-market property list. One is the most obvious one. I think it's the most obvious one, is looking at those expired listings. And if you've ever called expired listings, you know what kind of a seller I'm talking about. They don't want to relist, but they're willing to sell if the right buyer comes along. This is a dead end for a lot of expired agents that prospect expired listings. They don't want to sell. They might have had a really bad experience with that agent. They might have an issue with their home that they don't want to address. You know what? Unless I find someone who wants to buy it with this and with this situation, with this condition, with these terms, I don't want to sell my home. Great, that's awesome, right? I would call them all up. Expires from this year, last year, from 3 years ago, 4 years ago, 5 years ago. If they haven't relisted and sold in that time, I'd give them a call and say, and this is the best script ever. Hey, I'm not calling to list your home, right? I know everybody calls you every now and then to list that property, especially if it's a more recent expired, but I don't want that. I just want to know that if the right buyer came along, would you be interested in selling and would you pay a commission to get that property sold? Yeah, but only if they do this and this. Is great. That's awesome. Write down they have specific term. That's great. I'm only going to share this information with a qualified buyer. I'm not just going to put this out there to anyone and everyone. Oh, that's great. That's what I want. Great. Thank you so much. Next, right? So you can do that with that solid pitch, right? Or what other people do is once they realize that they're in that dead end with a potential seller, they go, you know what? At least let me add you to my off-market property list. How does that sound? That way, I'm not going to list your home. You apparently don't want to do that. But if I find a qualified buyer that's willing to meet these terms, then I'll give you a call and we'll present each other. And if you close a deal, then only then would you pay me a commission. And they go, for sure, right? That's usually where a lot of these expired people want to go. The ones that are adamant about not listing that property. Great, that's awesome. Get them into the off-market property list. That way, that call was still useful, still valuable, no matter the outcome, right? Because almost all of them are willing to agree to that. Almost all of them are willing to agree to that, right? To be on that off-market property list. Great. That's number one. Number two, for sale by owners. Okay. For sale by owners. What's the number one objection you get from a for sale by owner? Oh, if you can bring me a buyer, then we can talk, right? So imagine if you could call up a FSBO, hey, I want to give you a buyer, right? But I need some information first. Like, tell me about your property. The pictures on the email, yeah, those pictures suck. Tell me more, right? Tell me more. I want to see other things. Great. And then the number one issue with FSBOs, if they haven't sold in this market, if they haven't sold within a week, within 2 weeks, within 3 weeks, there's an issue with condition over price. That's usually one of the two. That's usually, I know I'm painting with a broad brush here, but I'm telling you, usually it's an issue with one of the two. I'd ask them right off the bat, if I bring you a qualified buyer, are you willing to be flexible on that price? You'd be surprised what the answer is actually, right? If I bring you a qualified buyer that can pull the trigger, would you be flexible on that price, right? I'd like to know that, right? Off the bat. Perfect. That's awesome. Record the answer. Don't even judge. Just record the answer. Great. That's awesome. If I bring you a qualified buyer, would you be willing to pay a buyer's agent commission? Almost all of them will say yes, right? Almost all of them will say yes. It's rare that a for sale by owner hasn't factored in the buyer commission. It's rare. They really don't want to pay the listing commission, but they typically will compensate a buyer because that's the hard part, right? That's the hard part, okay, for sure. You're not even going to argue with them. That's what makes this call is so easy. I want to add you to my off-market property list. And here's the punchline, Roberto. A lot of people that convert for sale by owners to listings, they use the same script. They get the information from the off-market property list, and they want to keep tabs on the property. How's it going this week? How's it going the next week? And that's their script. They qualify initially for the off-market property list, and they just check in every week. And if it hasn't sold, Roberto, I've been calling you the last 3 weeks, right? And your home hasn't sold. Are you ready to let me come in? Because you've already built some rapport, hopefully, right? They know who you are. They know you're not pushing, and you're not pushing for the listing appointment right away. They know that. So then they use that as a strategy to try to get them to get their foot in the door and have a listing presentation. Ultimately, with these for sale by owners, you're going to have a crucial conversation on condition or price or both, right? You're going to have some conversation like that. And it is way easier to do when you've built some rapport with them, right? And they think you're in it for more than just the quick buck. If that's the issue with most FSBOs are that way. Great, that's awesome. But at the very least, you're going to grow your off-market property list with that call, right? So I think that's a win. Sometimes people think if they don't get the appointment on the first call that they failed. Well, number one, FSBOs take 8 or 9 contact points typically to convert. Understand that, right? Because you need the ones that don't sell right away. The people that sell right away, you're not going to convert anyway. The ones that don't sell takes them a while to put their feet on the ground. I understand. But the other thing is, if that call grows your off-market property list, you've already won, right? That's a win. It's positive. It's a net positive. Great. Okay, what's the third way to create and add properties to that off-market property list? The one that's the bread and butter of how I started my company. This is so successful. I started a company around it, which is circle prospecting, right? People might not know this, but PowerISA, 100-person ISA company that I run, started as a circle prospecting company, right? Because there was a lot of need and use for that work, and that work is not easy to do, so it's easy to outsource for people, right? But that's another way you can grow that list because a lot of the main challenge of circle prospecting is that people are usually a year out from doing something, right? That's fine, but you can always add on to that script. Hey, I know you're trying to sell later on. You're not looking to sell right away, but how about this? If I were able to bring you a qualified buyer that would want to move for earlier than that, and they had a great offer, would you at least be interested in talking to them, right? No obligation. But if I brought you a qualified buyer that's ready to pull the trigger, would you at least listen to what they had to say? Just curious about that. And if they say yes, get them on your off-market property list, right? So there's 3 ways. Those are 3 really simple ways that you can do this. Your ISA can do this. I have a lot of clients that do this because at the very least, they want to grow. So they're prospecting for sellers. There's no mistake about that. They're looking for sellers on expired FSBO circle prospecting. But at the very least, worst case, they're generating properties for their off-market property list that get some buyers too, right? because they're also spending money generating buy. A lot of teams do this. They don't just do listings. They don't just prospect for listings. They don't just wait for their database to call them about listings. They're working with buyers too. There's a lot of them, right? So a way that they use, in a very smart way that they find to convert more of their buyers, is to always have an up-to-date off-market property list. And I think it's a really smart tactic. I think it's brilliant. I think it helps. I think it helps both arms of the business in real estate, buyers and sellers, how to create a virtuous cycle, have them help each other out, right? The more calls you make to get listings, the more properties are in that off-market property list, the more buyers want to talk to you. What? Wait, what? Gus has a 50 property off-market property list. I want to take a look at that. What if one of those could be my home? Woo, right? This is amazing. Great, right? So it's really, really important. And here's the kicker, right? They might not find a home they like on that off-market property list, right? They might not want the terms that the seller has. But guess what? They identified you as a resource. And you get a chance to sit down with them and tell them about everything you can do for them, right? You're going to win with this. Even if that off-market property list isn't the solution. It usually isn't. I'll give you guys I'll give you the spoiler alert. Spoiler alert. They might not find the property they want in that off-market property list. They might not find the seller they want in that off-market property list. That's fine, because you can help them find the right home at that point, right? If you're talking to them and there's a 3/4 chance, 75% chance almost, that you're going to be the person they're going to trust and work with, and they're already going to commit to, right? To finish that transaction. So that's pretty much it, guys. That's it. That is the value, the thought process behind having an off-market property list, and three tactics you can use to very quickly create, build up, and keep updated with that off-market property list.
Amazing, man. Amazing. Yeah, we've used, off-market properties. Again, you have to be compliant. I think there's a rule here in California, 24 hours after you advertise it, but you can still generate a ton of buyers. And that's
100%.
That's kind of
in every market you can do it, Roberto. I think it's the advertising you have to be careful with. I mean, again, I'm hand waving here. And then there's, this all came about because there was like I think, was it the Zillow coming soon thing? It was like that's considered an off-market property listing in some MLSs, right? So there's a lot, there's rules around it. Just know the rules, understand it, be compliant. You can do this. And every part of the country, people do this. So I know it's doable. Just do it in a compliant way.
Yeah, worst case, you can keep it off the, advertising and just talk to your buyers. Talk to your
Absolutely. Buyers. Talk to about people you already have a relationship with. Offer it to them. Show it to them, right?
Exactly.
Tell them about it in a phone call and a face-to-face meeting. If that's the only way you can do it that way. Still useful as part of your script.
Very useful. If you guys found value with this live today, remember we do this every Monday, 8:30-ish, around there. Every Monday, we call this Power Hour. So if you have questions, drop them. If there's a specific topic you want Gustavo to cover, let us know. Drop it in the comments. We'll take care of you. All right, guys. I know you have to go, so we'll talk later. Have a good one.
Thanks, everybody. See you on the next one.